Hey there. So in this video, I'm going to talk specifically about John Donne's poem, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. And you probably ought to watch my general intro about the metaphysical poets first. But anyway, we'll dive into this one. So the poem's called A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. A valediction basically is like a farewell address, like you're saying goodbye to someone. It's the root word of valedictorian, who gets that title because, like, they give the farewell speech at a graduation traditionally. So, in Valediction Forbidding Mourning, it's a farewell speech telling someone not to be sad. Specifically, in the case of this poem, Donne wrote the poem for his wife when he was leaving town for a while. And basically, the poem is trying to make his wife feel better. So, the first 8 lines are a little bit tricky because they're all one sentence. And they're a simile, but it takes him a while to get there. And basically, he's saying that the way that he describes people acting in stanza 1 is how, in stanza 2, as he describes it, he feels that he and his wife should act. So he says, as virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say the breath goes now, and some say no. So basically, he's saying we should be like virtuous men who, when they die, do so quietly, right? I mean, I don't think that this is really true, that virtuous men die more quietly than other men, but for purposes of the poem, he says virtuous men die quietly, and we should part from each other quietly, right? So let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods nor sigh tempests move. 'Twere profanation of the joys to tell the laity our love. So first of all, he's saying, let us be like the virtuous men, who when they are sad are quiet about it. And in the same way as we part from each other, let us be quiet about it. We'll make no noise, no tear floods nor sigh tempests, right? We're not going to cry enough to make a flood. We're not going to sigh enough. Tempest is like a thunderstorm, so we're not going to create drastic winds. And indeed, it would be profane. It would be profane is like the opposite of sacred, that it would somehow make our love less if we were big and loud about parting from each other, and this would let normal people, which here uses the term laity. This is in the religious sense, like a lay person is like a person in a church congregation who's not the preacher or whatever. We're not going to let the lay people, the normal people, know about our love. It's just for us. So, I mean, in effect, he's saying, let's keep our feelings to ourselves so that we can be private with them. And he then goes through this series of complicated metaphors or conceits, right? A conceit is a lengthy metaphor to sort of lay out why. I mean, ultimately what he's saying is why he feels that his wife shouldn't be sad. So he says, moving of the earth brings harms and fears. Men reckon what it did and meant. By moving of the earth, he means earthquakes, right? When there's an earthquake, it hurts people are afraid of it, and people try to figure out what it means. Men reckon what it did or meant. But trepidation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. Trepidation of the spheres is a concept from Ptolemaic astronomy, which is to say like Greek astronomy, where basically the idea was, right, I mean, Ptolemy believed that the Earth was at the center of the universe. So he had to explain why sometimes the planets seem to reverse direction in the sky, which of course the real reason that they're doing it is because everything's in orbit, and sometimes, we're suddenly going in different directions relative to certain planets. But what he came up with was this idea of trepidation of the spheres, that the planets that were circling us he said, were on these spheres, that occasionally the spheres like switched and started going backwards, and that's trepidation of the spheres. Now, what Donne is saying, right, is earthquakes, which happen here on Earth, scare people. But the trepidation of the spheres, which is much bigger than an earthquake, right? We're talking about planets moving across the sky, which is a bigger movement than just the ground shaking. But even though it's much greater, it doesn't hurt anyone. It's innocent. And as he goes on in the next stanza, he lays out, right, he says that other people, right, dull sublunary lovers, which is to say lovers who in a sense exist below the moon, um, they can't deal with absence, right? If you're just like a normal person, they're like such physical beings, right? They can't admit absence because their love depends on physical presence. But Donne is basically saying to his wife, our love's bigger than that. We're up in the sky. We're like the planets circling the earth. And, our love is made of more than just flesh. It's made of more than just the physical, right? We, by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is, enter assured of the mind, care less, eyes, lips, and hands to miss. That it's basically saying their love is so spiritual and lofty and pure that they'll be okay for a while if they don't have the physical part of it. Um, so then, in the last few stanzas, he really gets rolling. He says, our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold to airy thinness beat. The conceit in that stanza is really lovely, but he's saying, right, our souls are one, we're united, and even though I have to go, we won't have a breach. We won't break from each other when I leave, but instead we'll be like gold that when you pound on it, instead of shattering, right, gold spreads into a bigger sheet because it's malleable. So on the one hand, he's saying, right, he's doing a lot here, and this is pretty typical of Donne, that like the metaphors have multiple levels. He's saying that their love is like gold, their love is pure and beautiful like gold, their love is malleable like gold, their love can kind of spread out. That in a sense, him leaving doesn't shatter their love, it actually makes their love bigger, which is a kind of a lovely idea. Um, so yeah, he loads all of that into that stanza, and then he keeps going. If they be two, meaning our souls, if they, our souls, be two, they are two so as stiff twin compasses are two, right? So if we're two different beings, we're two different beings like compasses. And what he means here is like the compass that you like draw a circle with, right? That you used in like geometry class or like art projects in elementary school or whatever, right? The one with the pointy foot and the pencil foot, and you draw a circle. He's saying if our souls are our two souls, then we're like 2 feet of the compass. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth if the other do. Right? So his wife's soul, he says, is like the pointy foot, the foot that stays in place, because of course she's staying at home. And she doesn't move, but she does sort of tilt around like that foot if the other foot of the compass is moving. And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. So here there's this image of like the center foot sort of leaning out and desiring the other foot. And then when the compass comes together, it's like the two of them coming back together. Which, of course, by the way, I would point out that what the compass is drawing is a circle which also resembles the circular orbits of the planets, which exist on the spheres that Donne said that their love is like a circle, somewhat like that sheet of gold spreading out, or a circle like a wedding band. Also worth noting, the symbol that alchemists used to describe gold during this period was a dot with a circle around it. So actually the compass image is also an image for gold. So all of Donne's different conceits get jumbled up together. I mean, this is what I was talking about Donne almost writing kind of puzzles that you get to assemble. I mean, there's something really beautiful about the way that all of these metaphors play off of each other. But anyway, so the one compass foot is out there in the world drawing the circle, and then it comes home, they come back together. And he brings it all together at the end. Such wilt thou be to me, who must like the other foot obliquely run, right? Like I'm like the foot with the pencil that draws the circle, which of course Donne is the foot with the pencil, because after all, Donne's the one who is a writer. So I'll be out there in the world, and then he'll come home, and as he says at the end, thy firmness makes my circle just, and makes me end where I began. So at the end, he's basically saying, you're who holds me together, you're who keeps me on track, you make the circle true, that, the reason that the circle comes back together correctly at the end is you. Um, it's a complicated poem that runs through a series of metaphors, and I've really only scratched the surface of everything that one could talk about or everything that's going on in this poem. I mean, Donne's using all kinds of interesting literary devices. It's also just a beautiful sounding poem. But it really is one of the great love poems ever written in English. And so, yeah, if you have any further thoughts about it or whatever, let's hash it out on the message board. I'd love to talk about it more with you. I really like this poem. So, yeah, all right. And I'll talk to you soon.